Before Lagos became the unstoppable giant everybody talks about today, before the skyscrapers and the traffic and the dreams that rise from every corner of the city, it started with something simple: water. A calm, soft stretch of lagoon that glittered under the sun like a sheet of polished glass. Back then, everything moved slowly. The mornings were quiet, the evenings were peaceful, and life followed the rhythm of the tides. Small communities lived along these waters, the Awori and the Agun people, casting nets at dawn, paddling across the lagoon with carved wooden canoes, returning home with baskets of fish and stories. Smoke drifted gently from cooking fires. Children played around palm trees, and no one, absolutely no one, could have imagined that this peaceful place would one day become the beating heart of an entire nation. But destiny has a funny way of revealing itself. One day, strangers appeared on the horizon. Europeans on tall wooden ships, their sails cutting through the breeze. They stepped off their boats, looked at the shimmering lagoon, and gave it a name in their own language: Lago, their word for lake. They didn't know they were planting the seed of a name the whole world would one day recognize: Lagos. Yet even as foreign visitors came and went, the people remained rooted in their way of life. The festivals continued, the drumming continued, the elders' stories continued. Their identity held firm. But history was already turning. Time passed, and the British arrived with a very different kind of intention. In 1861, they formally annexed Lagos, turning it into a crown colony. Just like that, flags changed, laws shifted, and power rearranged itself. Lagos Island, once a quiet trading settlement, began transforming into a busy commercial center. Ships lined the harbor, goods moved in and out. Colonial buildings rose on ground that had once been open sand and palm groves. The British began constructing roads and organizing trade. They saw Lagos as a gateway, a place where commerce could explode. And explode it did. The ports became some of the busiest in West Africa. Traders from faraway lands found their way to the lagoon. Lagos began to glow with a new kind of energy. As Nigeria inched closer to independence, Lagos found itself in a very special role. It wasn't just another town anymore, and it also wasn't officially a part of the western region around it. Instead, the city had been carved out as the Federal Capital Territory, the center of national authority. Ministers, diplomats, and civil servants filled the streets, each one contributing to the shaping of a future Nigeria. The city grew not just physically, but politically. But Lagos's geography, the islands, the creeks, the lagoons, played a major part in its destiny. These waterways connected everything, shaping where people lived, how they traded, and how the city expanded. Fishing thrived. Canoes became the lifeline of movement. Entire neighborhoods like Makoko stood on stilts, rising right out of the water. Before the sound of car horns filled the air, the sound of paddles dipping into the lagoon was the heartbeat of the city. But Lagos was already on a fast path. The colonial era brought new schools, many built by missionaries. Education took root. A new class of literate Lagosians emerged, people who would eventually shape politics, business, and society long after colonial rule faded. And as independence approached, Lagos became even more important. In 1954, Nigeria adopted federalism, and Lagos remained directly under federal control. This made it stand apart from the powerful western region surrounding it. Lagos was like a small but mighty island of national authority. Every election, protest, debate, and negotiation found its way into the streets of Lagos. The future of the entire country seemed to echo through its walls.
Then came 1967, a turbulent year, a moment when Nigeria stood at a dangerous crossroads. Tension brewed across the land, threatening to tear the nation apart. And in the middle of that storm, the military government made a bold strategic move. It dismantled the old regions and created 12 new states. On May 27, 1967, Lagos State was born. It wasn't just Lagos Island anymore. It wasn't just the mainland. It wasn't just a federal territory. It became an entire state made up of many towns and communities. Badagry, with its ancient trade routes, Ipe, with its calm waters, Ikorodu, with its deep culture, Ikeja, with its rising modern structures, and of course, the ever-vibrant Lagos Island. The young state needed a capital, and while Lagos Island was historic, the government needed fresh land to build its institutions. So Ikeja became the official seat of power. Ministries formed, civil servants were hired, new systems were put in place. But even before the ink on the new state map dried, something massive was happening. People were arriving in Lagos from everywhere, from the east, from the north, from the south, from neighboring West African countries. Everyone heard the same whisper: Lagos is the land of opportunity. And they believed it. Day after day, families arrived with bags, boxes, and hope. Young men searching for jobs, women ready to start businesses, children ready to chase dreams, and Lagos absorbed them all, even though it was growing faster than any planner could control. Neighborhoods began growing almost overnight. Mushin expanded, Surulere rose, Yaba thrived, Ageje transformed, Ikotun buzzed. Markets multiplied in every corner. The city moved at a speed nobody could match. Lagosans invented their own rhythm, fierce, fast, unstoppable. The state government scrambled to keep up. Roads were extended, bridges contemplated, electricity networks expanded, water systems stretched. Planning departments drew new blueprints every week. And although Lagos sometimes felt chaotic, everything was somehow working. The city moved, breathed, and hustled its way into modernity. The markets became the soul of Lagos's economy. Balogun Market buzzed with fabric sellers. Idumota overflowed with traders. Alaba International grew into a marketplace so large it became famous across West Africa. Every street corner had something happening: a business, a sale, a negotiation, a dream being built right there under the sun. But Lagos was not only about business. Culture bloomed everywhere. Traditional festivals stayed alive, from the Ayo masquerades to community celebrations in Ikorodu and Epe. Meanwhile, new cultural forms emerged: theater, contemporary music, and street performances. Lagos became a melting pot where every voice blended into one powerful cultural heartbeat. Education grew, schools multiplied, universities expanded. Children born after the creation of the state entered classrooms built by new policies and new planning. Health services also took root: clinics, hospitals, maternity centers, all rising to support a population that kept growing. Of course, Lagos had its problems: flooding, overcrowding, sanitation issues, expensive housing, traffic that stretched for miles, and neighborhoods that grew faster than the city could manage. But Lagosans developed a special kind of resilience, the kind that made them laugh in traffic, hustle through challenges, and find solutions with pure street intelligence. Slowly, Lagos State developed its own personality, a spirit shaped by migration, by struggle, by hope, and by cultural diversity. People mixed, cultures blended, traditions intertwined, and Lagos became a state that belonged to everyone, yet still held its original soul tight. The early years of Lagos State were shaped by leadership, by the voices of the people, by the markets, by the streets, by the lagoon, and by the stubborn determination to survive and succeed. From fishing communities to colonial control to federal territory to a full-fledged state, Lagos evolved brick by brick, tide by tide, decade by decade. And by the end of this first chapter in its history, Lagos had already become something bigger than anyone ever expected, a force of nature, a rising star, a place where dreams gathered like waves on the shore. This is where the long journey of Lagos State truly begins, at the water's edge, carrying the weight of history, ready to grow into something extraordinary.
When Lagos State took its first breath in 1967, it did so during a storm, not a storm of rain, but a storm of tension, uncertainty, and fear spreading across Nigeria. The country was breaking apart, war was rising, and people everywhere whispered prayers into the night. Yet in the middle of that darkness, the new Lagos State stood like a small but determined flame. Lagos was unique. It was both a state and still the federal capital. Government offices were divided between responsibilities for the state and responsibilities for the entire nation. Ministers, soldiers, civil servants, journalists, everyone was moving through Lagos, holding pieces of Nigeria's future in their hands. Soldiers patrolled the streets. Ships in the lagoon were watched carefully. Radio stations buzzed with announcements that echoed from one end of the mainland to the islands. Lagos was alert, alive, and on edge. But even in the chaos, the city kept moving. Lagos never knows how to stand still. People still went to markets, traders still bargained with loud voices, fishermen still cast their nets, children still ran across sandy streets barefoot. Even in wartime, survival continued because Lagosians have always refused to pause their lives for too long. The war years sealed Lagos's role as a national anchor. Supplies were shipped through its ports, troops passed through its barracks. Refugees arrived, exhausted but hopeful, searching for safety. Lagos made space for them, sometimes with open arms, sometimes simply because there was no choice. The state grew in population, in pressure, in responsibility. And then, when the war finally ended in 1970, Nigeria exhaled for the first time in 3 years. Across the country, rebuilding began, and Lagos, as always, found itself at the center of everything. Oil money started flooding into the nation. Budgets expanded, ambitions expanded, cities expanded, and Lagos transformed at a speed no map could keep up with. The 1970s hit Lagos like a wave. It was the beginning of the oil boom, a period when Nigeria suddenly had more money than ever before, and every state was rushing to modernize. Lagos, with its ports, markets, population, and energy, became the engine of this national dream. And the transformation was massive. New roads were planned, bridges were sketched, housing estates were proposed, schools were upgraded, hospitals were opened. Government institutions moved into larger buildings. The city stretched itself in every direction, upward, outward, forward. Ikeja, once a quiet area, began rising as a serious administrative and residential zone. Surulere blossomed into a major middle-class neighborhood. Victoria Island started its journey into becoming the prime center of business and wealth. The Eco Bridge was extended. Plans for a third mainland bridge were whispered in offices. Lagos Island suddenly looked too small for the state's ambitions, and development turned toward the mainland with full force. Markets expanded like wildfire. Balogun and Idumota overflowed with fabrics and traders from across West Africa. Mile 2 became a major transit point. Oshodi burst into life, chaotic, overwhelming, but undeniably the beating heart of Lagos transportation.
And with all this development, the population exploded. People poured into Lagos from every corner of Nigeria. The dream of a better life pulled them in like a magnet. Young graduates came looking for jobs. Traders came looking for customers. Artisans came looking for work. Entire families arrived overnight with nothing but suitcases and determination.
The state government watched this explosion with growing concern. Lagos was becoming too big, too fast. Planning officials tore through maps, drawing new lines, creating new districts, attempting to impose order on a place that resisted control like a wild spirit. But even when Lagos misbehaved, when traffic froze, when floods filled the streets, when neighborhoods appeared without warning, the government kept trying. And amidst all this, something powerful was happening culturally. Lagos was becoming the creative heartbeat of Nigeria. The National Arts Theatre opened in the 1970s like a giant cultural crown resting on the Lagos landscape. Theater groups performed on its stage. Musicians recorded albums that would later become classics. Writers held gatherings. Painters exhibited their work. Lagos became a home for dreamers and artists, and from this energy, a new industry began to form, the early roots of what would later grow into Nollywood. But despite the shine, Lagos was under pressure. The traffic was suffocating. The housing shortage was intense. Waste management struggled. Flooding became a seasonal battle. The population outgrew every solution before it could even settle. The military government, juggling national leadership and state responsibility within the same city, struggled to keep up. In 1979, Nigeria shifted back to civilian rule, and Lagos got its first elected governor. Democracy returned with celebrations and hope. Lagosians felt like they finally had leaders who understood the daily struggles of living in such a wild, fast, energetic state. New housing estates were constructed, schools were expanded, health centers grew. But even with democratic leadership, Lagos's challenges remained enormous. Then, in 1991, something happened that would change the identity of Lagos forever. The federal government decided to move Nigeria's capital from Lagos to Abuja. The announcement shook the city. For decades, Lagos had been the political center, the place where the nation's decisions were made. Suddenly, that chapter was closing. But Lagos did not collapse. It did not fade. In fact, removing the weight of being both a state and a national capital allowed Lagos to breathe. For the first time, the state government could focus entirely on Lagos itself, on its people, its infrastructure, its future. From 1991 onward, Lagos entered a new phase, a rebirth. The government turned its attention to all the things that had been pushed aside for decades. Urban planning became a priority. Transport systems were reviewed. Waste management strategies were redesigned. Housing needs were reassessed. The state started thinking like a megacity, because by that point, Lagos already had millions of people living within its borders, more than some entire countries. And the people, they were everywhere. They filled the buses, the markets, the streets, the beaches, the offices, the schools. They spoke different languages, followed different cultures, but somehow blended into one identity: Lagosian. Loud, sharp, resilient, creative, fast, and endlessly determined. The 1990s also brought growth in entertainment. Music boomed, from Fuji to Afrobeats. Filmmakers started shooting low-budget films in Surulere, Idumuta, and Festac, launching what would soon become Nollywood. Markets like Alaba International became distribution kingdoms. Lagos became not just a commercial giant, but a cultural superpower. Of course, the challenges did not disappear. Lagos still fought with flooding, traffic, overcrowding, and environmental issues. But even in the struggle, Lagosians created solutions. Donfo drivers found shortcuts nobody else knew. Market women organized themselves into powerful associations. Local communities built their own drainage. Artisans formed unions. Everybody contributed something to the survival of the city. And every new leader brought their own ideas. Civilian and military governors tried to leave their marks,
Some succeeded, some didn't, but Lagos kept moving. As the 2000s approached, technology entered the city. Phones became common, new forms of business emerged, more estates were built. The Lekki Peninsula began its transformation from quiet land to a booming urban corridor. The population crossed the 10 million mark. Lagos became one of the fastest-growing cities in the world.
As the new millennium opened its arms to Lagos, the city stepped into it with the energy of a sprinter who had been waiting at the starting line for too long. The 2000s arrived with promise, chaos, ambition, and a hunger that felt almost physical. Lagos was ready to level up, and the universe could feel it. The population kept rising like it had no brakes. Every dawn brought new faces into the city. Young graduates dragging suitcases from arrival terminals, traders rolling trolleys through the markets, families squeezing into buses, hustlers breathing in the smell of opportunity. Lagos had become a giant magnet, pulling people from every corner of Nigeria, from neighboring West African countries, even from across the ocean. Everyone wanted a taste of the Lagos dream, even if the dream came with stress, traffic, and small wahala here and there. The government knew the pressure was real. Lagos wasn't just a city anymore. It was a monster-sized megacity that needed modern solutions. So leaders began thinking big, not small patch-up big, but change the whole vibe of the city big. And that's how Lagos entered another phase of transformation. Roads were expanded, new highways were constructed, bridges were repaired and strengthened. Traffic lights, once decorative items ignored by everyone, began to work properly. Private companies partnered with the government. New estates rose like fresh teeth pushing through the city's gums. And suddenly, the skyline started changing. The dream of a cleaner Lagos became serious. Waste management was reorganized. Trucks moved day and night, clearing the mountains of refuse that Lagosians produced without mercy. Street sweepers appeared everywhere, wearing bright uniforms and pushing brooms like they were wielding magic wands. Slowly, the city learned discipline, at least in the parts where discipline was possible. Markets were reorganized, motor parks were reshaped. Danfo buses still ruled the roads with their signature madness, but the introduction of BRT buses brought a new level of order. People lined up at bus stops. The blue buses glided across special lanes. Lagosians discovered the joy of a transport system that didn't require haggling or fighting for space. And then there was the ambitious dream, turning Lagos into a globally recognized megacity. The government wasn't joking. New laws came. Urban planning took center stage. Neighborhoods like Lekki transformed from quiet land into high-value real estate. Victoria Island became the face of modern Nigeria. Ikoyi evolved into a zone of class and wealth. Even the mainland, Mushin, Yaba, Surulere, Agege, saw upgrades that reshaped their character. But Lagos is never one thing. Where there is progress, there is also struggle. The population refused to slow down. Traffic remained a permanent part of the Lagos experience, like the spice in jollof, sometimes too much, sometimes overwhelming, but always present. Flooding still battled with the city every rainy season. Housing remained expensive. Noise remained loud. Life remained chaotic. But Lagosians adapted, because adaptation is tattooed into their spirit. Young people entered the tech world with unstoppable confidence. Yaba became the heartbeat of Nigeria's tech revolution, the famous Yabakan Valley. Innovation hubs popped up. Startups launched apps, platforms, and digital solutions that reached across Africa. A new generation of Lagosians emerged, typing dreams into laptops inside co-working spaces. And while technology rose, something else exploded even harder: entertainment. Music in Lagos became unstoppable. The city unofficially crowned itself the capital of Afrobeats. Every corner produced a star. Studios in Fistech, Ikeja, Lekki, and Surulere recorded beats that traveled to London, New York, Johannesburg, and beyond. Artists performed at small venues and large arenas, carrying the Lagos vibe with them. And Nollywood, the industry born partly in this city, reached global heights. Producers shot movies in Lekki mansions, in crowded streets, in old buildings, in markets, everywhere. Lagos became both the stage and the backstage of Nigerian cinema. Alaba International Market distributed films faster than any official system. Directors and actors became household names. Films from Lagos reached Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, the Caribbean, even Europe and America. The industry grew so big that streaming platforms soon joined the party, chasing the Lagos film magic. Yet even with all these achievements, Lagos kept facing the same age-old challenges: overcrowding, housing shortages, strained roads, limited land, rising sea levels threatening waterfront communities. The state government tried to fight back with new strategies by building drainage channels, redesigning transport routes, starting rail projects, strengthening environmental laws, expanding security networks. And still, Lagosians found ways to survive and laugh. They joked in traffic, they danced at parties, they turned stress into memes, they turned struggle into strength. The Lagos spirit refuses to break. As the 2010s rolled in, the city stretched even further. Flyovers appeared in Ojota, Ikeja, Aja. The Lekki-Ikoyi link bridge rose like a symbol of a new era, a sleek structure reflecting the night sky. People took pictures on it, jogged across it, claimed it as proof that Lagos could be both chaotic and beautiful. Infrastructure grew. More estates appeared. The population soared past 20 million. The Lagos economy grew stronger than that of many African countries. Investors arrived. Corporations set up headquarters. Hotels filled the skyline. Restaurants multiplied. The nightlife became legendary. From clubhouses to lounges to beach resorts, Lagos reinvented leisure like it reinvented everything else. But the biggest shift was the mindset of the people. Lagosians realized their city wasn't just a place to live, it was a global force. They embraced the hustle with pride. They found creative ways to earn money. They pushed boundaries. Every day felt like a movie scene, full of drama, full of flair, full of ambition. The whole city moved like a Nollywood soundtrack, fast, emotional, loud, and unforgettable. Even during tough times, recessions, fuel scarcity, economic downturns, political tension, Lagos stood firm. The state kept innovating. New reforms came. Digital services increased. Technology entered governance. Community awareness grew. Transportation systems expanded with ferries and rails. More projects launched to reshape the future of the megacity. And now, Lagos stands as one of the largest cities on the planet, a powerhouse of culture, business, technology, entertainment, migration, and human resilience. A place where millions wake up every morning with the same determination burning in their eyes. If part 1 was about origins, if part 2 was about growing pains, then part 3 is about Lagos stepping fully into its destiny. Bold, overwhelming, electrifying, and unforgettable. A city with too many stories to count. A home for anyone willing to fight for their dreams. A monster and a miracle at the same time. A place where history doesn't sit still, it dances. And that is how Lagos State, born from water and shaped by fire, became a megacity the world cannot ignore.